From headlines to heartbeats, this is More Than News with Kris Moore. Buckle up for a journey beyond the surface, where we uncover the real stories shaping our world.
Hey there, it's Kris Moore with More Than News podcast. We've got a great show today, and we really want to thank you for joining us. And I want to ask you something. Whichever platform that you are listening to, whether it's Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, even over at YouTube, be sure and hit that subscribe button. And we sure appreciate you being here. Well, today we're going to bring our story, our podcast, right here to the Permian Basin. We're going to be discussing the history of oil and gas. Now, we know the popularity right now of the show Landman. I don't know if you've seen that on Paramount Plus with Billy Bob Thornton, John Hamm, and a few others. It's kind of dicey. It's got a lot of true facts in it, but it's really brought even more attention to the oil and gas industry here in the Permian Basin. So I brought in a friend and an expert on that, oil and gas. It's Jeff Smith. Now, Jeff is a geologist along with many other things. So let's get right into it. Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Jeff Smith. I grew up in the Hudson Valley in New York. Actually in an area where it was all farms and ranches. An area where you got home from school, you got your gun, you walked out the back door, and you went hunting. Which most people don't recognize. You go, in New York, how do you can't do that? Well, yes, you don't do it in Manhattan, but you know. At any rate, I went to a top school up there, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where geology was very first studied in the United States. And I was on a PhD thesis, and I had an interview with Mobil Oil. And I was already past the master's, and the guy said, we have one job in the whole country. And he said, okay, I'm going to ask you what I asked everybody. Have you ever smoked marijuana? I said, well, listen, I'm doing my thesis in the Woodstock area. This was 1969, when they actually had the Woodstock Festival.
Right.
And I said that that's where I'm doing my thesis, and I consider marijuana a study aid. And he cracked up laughing. Surprisingly, I got that one job. It really was one job. I got it. And went and told the faculty I did not want to finish the doctorate. I wanted to come down here and go to work. Mobil actually gave me a choice of 5 different cities, and none of them big cities. So I picked Midway. And I've been here since 1970. I've been here 54 years, working as a geologist, but kind of trained in geophysics and petrophysics and petroleum engineering. I'm trained in all of it. So I've been involved in all of it for 54 years, and I'm still here. So anyhow, that's my history of being here.
Okay, well, let's talk about what was going on back in 1970 in Midland, Texas. What was the oil and gas industry like then?
Back in 1970, every major oil company had a big office in Midland. Well, Mobil had like 7 floors at Oil Towers West. Mm-hmm. And nobody had hardly any rigs out. The oil was about $2.50 a barrel. And it was just strange. I mean, Humble and Texaco and Shell, everybody had huge offices because they had been consolidated. They used to have little offices in No Trees, Pegasus, Frankel City, Hobbs, and Roswell, Archie, everywhere. And they started little by little closing them all down and bringing everybody into Midland and consolidating. Because, we got out of the 1940s and 50s, the world, World War II and Korean War had really jacked up all the prices and the drilling. And they told me when I got here that they said, if you'd been here not that many years ago, you didn't have to use any headlights when you drove around at night. Because in so many areas in the Permian Basin, there were so many wells where they're just flaring all the methane. And so they had all the lights, the skies were just lit up all the time from the flares. You didn't even need headlights on a car.
Wow.
Yep. Because now on TV, they see all those flares, and they go, look at all the methane they're putting in the air. Because they don't realize that it's not methane when you burn it. And, if you're looking at somebody's fireplace and you're seeing all the smoke going up, you don't go, hey, look at all those trees they're putting into the air. When you burn the trees, they're no over trees. When they burn methane, it's no over methane.
What does it become?
It becomes carbon dioxide and water vapor and a few other things. But it's not methane when you burn it. Burning something is oxidizing it.
Okay.
That's all it is. Chemical reaction, you're oxidizing.
Okay. So I always like to say, because I remember when I would drive down 191 in between Midland and Odessa, and as we know, anybody that lives here in the Permian Basin, there's oil rigs, there's pump jacks, and there's a lot of flaring. To me, it looks like a birthday cake with a bunch of candles. So that's how I always relate to flaring. But it was so different back then. How did they, because there was no fracking. So it was like you were still fracking, you were fracking.
The rest of the story in the 1920s.
Oh.
When there's been all kinds of different fracking jobs that have been done, and fracking, drilling changes, fracking changes, everything changes. And when I first came here, I said it was with very few rigs working, and especially in exploration and mobile exploration where I started out. They had a couple of deep wells going in central Texas, one over Hillsboro, going down to 22,000 feet, another one up in Permian County north of Dallas to 19,000. They had me on both of those. And back to the very first one, they said, okay, you're going over there to that rig. And they got me a plane ticket on Treetops Airlines and told me when I got to Love Field to go to the Hertz desk because I had a rate car there. I came from a poor family. I didn't know about credit cards. I had a mobile credit card. So I go up to the Hertz counter, I go, here's my credit card. And I go, what? But back then, people would do things differently. So I explained to them, I said, well, I'm a new geologist here. And so they were going to figure out some way to get me the car. But then some other mobile geologist came to turn the car in, and he had a credit card, so I got it on his. But that's the first time I flew over there and got the mobile credit card. I didn't know.
So obviously things have changed a lot.
No one in my family ever had credit cards, So, yeah. But out here on the ridge, we did what was called footage. So a contractor told you what they would charge you to go to, say, 12,000 feet. Well, eventually it all became day work. So you had to pay them for each day. Funny how much they could really slow down the drilling when it became they got paid for every day. All of a sudden, it took a whole lot more days. So then
More days, more money?
So then we started putting people on the rigs that we called company men. Because they were there to really monitor and watch out how they were doing everything out there so they didn't take way too many days. Yeah. But back in those days, actually, with good companies, they used to use Markham drilling a lot. Markhams were here in town. In fact, one of Markham's, the son, became Judge Markham. And back in those days, you might drill 200, 250 feet in a day.
Okay.
Now we drill 400 to 500 feet in an hour.
Wow.
Times have changed.
Yes, sir.
But, I remember reading back in the 1970s, I read the book Future Shock. And they said that 95% of all the scientists and engineers that had ever been alive and working were alive and working then. Well, now it's probably 99.999% of all the scientists and engineers that have ever been alive and working are alive and working now. So it's unbelievable how fast everything changes. And the frac jobs have changed tremendously. And now the horizontal drilling, I was on horizontal wells in the late 1990s, and I went out just mostly to see how it worked. And I actually took a job out there mud logging so I could see how.
Define what a mud logger is.
Well, what they are is they're making the samples.
Yes, sir.
They're catching samples and putting them in a microscope after they dry the samples off and telling you whether you're in a sandstone or a limestone or a chert or a dolomite or what you're in. And they got gas chromatograph monitoring gas that may be coming up with the mud. And oil and gas fluoresce. So then they're looking for fluorescence. So you're trying to find where you got a pay zone. And the mud logging used to be very, very important, much more than it is now. When I went out and did that, worked in 24-hour shifts, I think I was getting $160 a day for a 24-hour shift. That's how things were in the late 90s.
What is an average for here in 2024? So the same job?
Same job now. The mud loggers themselves get paid a lot more on the company. Most of the companies they had gone up to $1,500 to $1,600 a day. And now because this mud logging is going to get beat down, now they're back down to maybe $1,000 to $1,100 a day. And the actual loggers can make an okay salary, but nothing a lot more than I got paid in 1998, but they're not getting near as much as they did, say, 10 years ago.
Okay.
Everything goes up, everything goes back down. But I did it mostly so I could learn about horizontal drilling, because these were on wells south of Midland that were horizontal. And back then, you have to always take surveys to see where you are. You have to know where you are, they're horizontal. And back then, it would take you 45 to 50 minutes to do a survey, so I could take naps. Now you don't even have to stop and do it. You just do it while you're drilling. Now we have what's called rotary steering. It used to be you had to stop and you couldn't turn anymore. You had to stop and slide, which is just pushing, which is really, really slow. And the first times I saw rotary drilling, it was about 20 years ago on a rig for Exxon up in Wyoming. And we saw the rotary steering, and what a change that made. But it was pretty rare back then. Well, now it's just everybody uses rotary steers, and fracking, we're doing different zones now. Now we're not doing the same zones. Now we're doing shales. That started over there. George Mitchell started that over in the Fort Worth Basin in the Barnett Shale. And now it's just all over the place doing shales. And that's one of the things I had told the people who who started Dynamite. I told them that we're going to start doing the Sprayberry shales.
Okay.
Yeah.
A big question. Of course, we know that the current administration is all into being green, trying to push everything electric, trying to push everything with wind turbines. And we know that's not, we had a freeze here in West Texas. Your wind turbines freeze, your solar there's clouds. So, but we are eventually going to run out of oil, correct?
We have almost 200 years left of natural gas in this country.
Okay.
And natural gas is very clean, and wind and solar are an economic disaster.
Yes, they are.
I actually read in the New York Times a number of years back, it wasn't that many years ago, that the true cost of generating electricity. So now you remember when Barack Obama ran in 2008, he said, if you elect me, your electrical bills will soar. He knew it was going to force it to go up. And he kept saying that, campaigning. If you elect me, the cost of electricity will soar. And it was in the New York Times that to generate a certain amount of electricity with wind turbines required $56 of taxpayer subsidy. And the same amount with fossil fuels required 62 cents of private money. So 62 cents of private money versus $56 of subsidy. Now, solar is almost 3 times more than wind.
And they say that's going to save the country.
It's not saving a thing.
No, it is not.
We have a shortage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and carbon dioxide has very, very little effect on the climate, hardly any at all. It's not a climate driver, it's a climate rider. We have 50 times more CO2 in the oceans than we do in the atmosphere. And when you go into a warm cycle, and warm cycles happen, and when you go in a warm cycle, then a lot of it comes out of the ocean, exhales into the atmosphere. You go back into a cold cycle, it redissolves. We can see that in ice core data that goes back millions of years.
Yeah.
So it's not a climate driver, it's a climate rider.
So what do you feel like is going to happen? We are going into 2025, new president, drill, baby, drill. Do you think that they will back up on some of those wind turbines, or you think you're going to continue to give me that?
Even when he was president last time, an awful lot of this went on during his administration, not because of him, but because we are largely governed by bureaucracies. Now, over in Europe, Germany went all green, and their electrical costs skyrocketed, so all their industries fled. But right next door is Poland, and they're not on it. And Poland kept using coal. So pretty soon, to bring their electrical costs down, Germany started buying electricity from Poland and getting the coal-fired plants. Now, over in China, there's always in the news about how China's way ahead of all of us on wind and solar. No, they're not. They make it to sell it to us. China doesn't have oil. They already have any oil. They have lots of coal. So China is getting their electricity from coal. They weren't buying natural gas for a while. They were getting it from Indonesia, And they were paying over $15 an MCF, while over here it was $2 an MCF.
Now, what is MCF?
That's 1,000 cubic feet.
Okay.
and we measure and price gas in MCFs. And they were paying 7 to 8 times more than we were. Now, China did decide to start drilling some horizontal wells in a coal bed. At one time, there was a big play going on here in the U.S. called coal bed methane. And there's quite a bit of it going on in northern New Mexico, over Farmington, that area, and southern Colorado. And China was going all in on it. They had a consulting company from Canada that was over there. I did work with those guys. They actually asked me if I'd be interested in going to China and being involved in that project, and I didn't do it. Would have been interesting.
It would have been very educated.
Yeah, but I've also been asked to go to Russia as a consultant. I didn't do that either. So, but Russia, I thought it was because it was dangerous.
Right.
But anyhow, there are a couple of coal bed methane wells in Texas. I really don't know if they ever produced, but I'm the guy who drilled them.
So how long ago was that?
I don't know what, maybe 15 years ago, something like that.
Not too.
A family from Michigan, Patrick Petroleum, was a well-known company in Michigan, and the two sons, Mark and Steve Patrick, took over the company, and they wanted to try coal bed methane on a little field over here in central Texas. Here we call the Texas Atlas, and they kept looking around for somebody who knew the geology in that area and who knew how to drill wells like that, and they kept getting from lots of different people they said, call Jeff Smith. So I went down and did their wells.
How about that?
I don't think they ever produced them, actually.
Okay, I have another
But I did them, yeah.
question for you. How do they determine the price of oil per barrel, which of course affects the price of gas? How does that all calculate?
Well, we always tell everybody, if you want to know what the price of oil is going to be tomorrow, just take a look and see where it is today over in Elos. Really? The Brent exchange. And almost all costs of oil and gas have to do with international geopolitics and international markets. And so one of the places where it's set is at the Brent exchange in London.
Yeah.
And that comes over here the next day.
Well, being someone that does not know that, you would assume it is the availability of oil and gas. Like if you're not pumping enough barrels per day, that's going to make it more scarce. That's going to increase the cost of gas, is what I assume. But in fact, that's not. How do they calculate?
Well, there are some local things that happen, similar to, but most of it is international. Most of it geopolitics and geoeconomics, and but. Now, natural gas in this country, we used to ship a lot of natural gas to the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have various hubs were set up. And the one down the Gulf Coast, the Henry Hub, was a great place to try to market your gas. That was a good price. We had one out here in the Lower Basin. It used to be fairly a good marker of natural gas going to the West Coast. All of a sudden, the West Coast didn't want gas anymore. They didn't want it. So gas over there a little over a year ago was minus $3.34 an MCF. You had to pay them to take your gas. Shit. The pipeline. So you had to pay a pipeline money to actually take your gas.
Yeah.
So some companies do it the right way, like Diamondback did. They traded their own pipeline company. They went over to the Delaware Basin west of us and started pumping their own gas back east so they could get it over to the Gulf Coast where they get a decent price for it.
Okay.
But you couldn't get a price on the West Coast. You see, on the West Coast, where we spent tens and tens of millions of dollars trying to save the California condors, because they lived in a real steep little declivities in the foothills of the mountains.
Right.
Well, those are really big places to put wind turbines.
So that's what
Now the wind turbines are wiping out the condors, but the environmentalists, they don't want to admit that, so now they claim the condors are dying because over 2 states to the east in Utah, they still use lead shot instead of copper shot when they go hunting.
So, again, we're going into 2025.
Yeah.
What is your prediction for the industry?
My prediction is that I think oil prices will go up. I don't know how much. I know what night they're going to go up real high. I don't buy that. I think they'll go up. But, we never know what's going to happen in the Middle East. What's going to happen in Russia and Ukraine. We don't know these things.
Right.
But natural gas is something that is U.S. And if we can get more and more states in the U.S. to realize how much they're paying for all wind and solar nonsense.
Yeah.
And all of our Rocky Mountain bases have thousands and thousands of feet of rich organic shales full of natural gas. I worked up there. I consulted in there for Exxon. I was on a lot of rigs up there in Colorado and Wyoming. It's pretty amazing how much natural gas we have in the basins in the Rocky Mountains. It's incredible. We have a couple hundred years worth.
Wonderful. So where do you feel the industry should start going, leaning toward, to replace natural oil and gas?
I had always thought at some point we'd probably go up to nuclear, but it seems like people on neither side, nobody wants the nuclear. They don't want it. You know, the country in Europe that has the cheapest electricity is France, and they get over 80% of their electricity from nuclear. But they're the only country in Europe that doesn't. They're the only one.
So somebody's going to have to sit down and figure this out.
Yes.
We know turbines are not the answer.
No, they're really not. You know, and there's some of this stuff is political nonsense too. You know, after Obama got elected, there were Democratic bunglers who got $550 million of taxpayer money to build a huge solar plant called Solyndra. And they, of course, took millions out of it, and it went bankrupt.
Of course.
But then the one that was even worse was over here in a really exotic, environmental protected area of the Mojave Desert.
Mm-hmm.
Another group, prominent Democratic bunglers, wanted to put in a huge solar field out in the Mojave Desert. Well, everybody knew that there were endangered species out there like the Mojave tortoises, and everybody fought that. The Environmental Defense Fund and all these big organizations, they fought it. But Harry Reid in Nevada was the Senate Majority Leader, and his son was an attorney. So they hired his son to be their attorney.
And what did he get paid for that, I wonder?
And so all of a sudden, all of the environmental organizations stopped their complaints, and they went in with great big backhoes, and they hired a bunch of zoologists, etc., to find where the tortoises were, and they used the front end loaders, dig them all up, and move them to new homes where most of them died. And then they put wind turbines, solar, all over the place, and it all sat there, not even being used. It's still that way. It's just all sitting out there, covering all the land and not even being used.
And taxpayers.
But they all got paid lots of money, yeah.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah, that's how things work. Yeah.
All right. Well, there we go. So somebody's going to have to put their thinking cap on and figure out what we're going to do moving forward. And, we're not going to be here in 200 years.
I was in Colorado when they started the big Rocky Mountain Express pipeline. I was there. It was right west of Meeker, Colorado, where I've often stayed. And it was incredible. For several miles, there was nothing but Euclids and just unbelievable equipment everywhere. And they spent $10 million building that Rocky Mountain Express pipeline to take natural gas from the Rocky Mountains up to the East Coast. And once they got it all done, nobody wanted it and went bankrupt.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up. And I have a question for you. People are listening or watching right now, and they're wanting to know a little bit more about how the industry works and to try to keep up with what is going on with oil and gas. What's a good way to do that? Is there a magazine, a subscription? How do you follow that? Some good books to read?
So I haven't read a book in quite a while, unfortunately, because I watch so much eyesight.
Right.
Yeah.
Podcasts are for.
Of course, I'm here in Midland where I go to all the geological luncheons and things like that. And I talk to lots of people, companies. I'm actually still doing some consulting.
I knew you were.
Because they said they're not hearing my eyes, they're hearing my brain. So I got a few projects I'm doing. But, some of the financial networks, they kind of keep up with some of these things. They do. When you can go back and forth between like CNBC and Fox News. And there was a time way back that CNBC hired me, or they didn't pay me actually, but they had me take them around, their people around for 5 days one time. So where I am when Jack Ladd was still running the John Ben Shepherd Leadership Institute at UTTV, who recommended me. So I got contacted by CNBC, and I took their people around for a week all over the place.
It is very educational for folks that don't understand how it works to actually come out here and see it. We're, not poisoning people. So, well, I so appreciate you taking some time, sharing a little bit of the history, quite a bit of the history of oil and gas here in the Permian Basin.
Anytime. Yeah.
And we'll do it again real soon. So, Jeff Smith, thank you, sir. We want to thank all of y'all for joining us today. And as I said at the beginning of the program, please, whatever platform you are listening to or watching, give us a like. We appreciate it. We like you. This is More Than News. I'm Kris Moore, and we'll check you out next time.
You've been listening to More Than News with Kris Moore. Join us next time as we continue to dig deeper, ask tougher questions, and bring you the insights that truly matter.